And good morning. It is time for the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And now your host, Mike Hewitt. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Brian Thomas, and good morning, Jim Riley.
Hey, I'm here, baby.
Wow, we're all on board. Listen, I got to tell you, this is like the Super Bowl if you're a political wonk. Watching the primary results, trying to watch the candidates' posture, watch folks that are supporters of the candidates' posture. But last night was kind of a big night, and between last night and next week on the 15th, those two primary cycles for the various states will really absolutely tell us what kind of primary we really have. You know, we started out with 17, we're down to 4. My prediction is that after the 15th, we'll be down to Cruz and Trump.
On the Drudge Report, the cartoon, which quite often they'll have a cartoon at the top of the Drudge Report, but they've got a shrunken little, as if he was a dwarf version of Marco Rubio.
So that's supposed to be...
And they title it The Incredible Shrinking Campaign. So if you've got a computer handy, you might want to hit that. It's kind of funny, and it's indicative of really what's happened to the Rubio campaign.
It is, but it's an interesting side note, because if you watch Trump's bombastic style, listen, folks, I'm not chastising the guy. He's on fire, and it's working for him. But Marco Rubio tried to emulate it. And all through the whole primary process, every time Trump did something, everyone went, wow, that's going to kill his campaign. Of course, it made him stronger. So Marco, being the brilliant guy that he is, so I'm going to try that myself. And it killed his campaign like we would have always have predicted that it would to somebody. And he's going, wait, it worked for him.
I think that's an interesting insight. Yeah. It's working for Trump. Trump can do things and get away with things that probably no one else in the country can.
You know, when you start making fun of someone's hands, etc., you go, that's not presidential. What are you thinking? Then when Trump does it back, I'm going, oh, stop it. But then it works for him, and it kills the first guy.
I know. I want to buy some of those Trump steaks. Yeah. That's what I want.
$50, he said. He priced me right out of the market, I'm afraid.
For those who missed it, and I did, I only caught it on replay this morning, but apparently Trump was feeling comfortable enough. He said, well, hey, I've gotten some static because of all my various businesses. So he had a big display of the Trump wine. He had a bunch of boxes of the Trump steaks and the various other endeavors that the Trump name has been attached to. So,
Jim, do you have you been able to find a county by county in Michigan yet for the results? I know that Otto went heavy for Cruz. And I think Muskegon leaned Cruz. Is that true or not?
Yes. Our good friend, Captain Fred Birch, who is the Muskegon County campaign manager for the Cruz group.
What a great guy. What a nice man.
Well, he's a good guy, but he's a smart guy, and he delivers. And, yes, let me give you the numbers here. Surprising to me, well, surprising to all of the experts and all the prognosticators, but in Muskegon County, for those of you living out there in Muskegon County, Bernie Sanders won soundly and solidly over Hillary Clinton, and Ted Cruz won soundly and solidly over Donald Trump. Ted Cruz in Muskegon County only won about 34.5% of the vote. Donald Trump 30.5%. John Kasich a little under 20%. So in Muskegon, and that pattern pretty much mirrors what we saw in most of the West Michigan counties, at least those surrounding Muskegon.
I'm looking at a map, and of course this particular map is one of those interactives, and it doesn't work well on my iPad. But if it's a color map, so it shows all of the counties that Trump took, which was frankly a vast majority of Michigan, with the exception of West Michigan, which largely went for Cruz. 5 counties in West Michigan went solidly for Cruz, Ottawa being the highest percentage. A large county up in the UP went for Cruz, and somewhere over just west of Bay County went for Cruz. 2 counties went for Kasich. But I don't. Part of it goes to Fred Birch, by the way, because it's the 2nd district. When I look at the counties that went for Cruz, it goes to your point. The man worked really hard for Cruz. So I say, attaboy. I wish we could have put him in a Xerox machine and ran off some copies.
Well, let's understand something that perhaps we forget, and this isn't necessarily a knock, but it must be an acknowledgement. The city of Detroit, whose leaders have been, of course, elected by the voters of Detroit, but the leaders in the city of Detroit have a long, long history of very poor decisions. And the city of Detroit pretty much determines every statewide or national election that happens in the state of Michigan. So no matter what we do here, no matter what they do in Grand Rapids, no matter what they do in Oakland and Macomb County, it's the city of Detroit that has made Michigan either a Democrat state when it comes to a national election for president, or a Republican state when it comes to voting for governor and the various senators, if that were to happen. So that's really where it's happening. We're out here doing the best we can in all the outside cities and counties. But
now, listen, the interesting part about your comment is on that same map I looked at for the Republican side, I'm looking at this shows blue and green to represent Sanders and Clinton. And I think most folks know by now that Sanders beat Clinton by a couple percentage points, which was shocking since 3 or 4 days ago he was at a 20% disadvantage to her. But when I look at the map for her, and what made me want to look back at this is when you were talking about Detroit. When I look at the two of them, of course, Clinton tells a lie when the truth sounds better. That particular debate aside, she's more centrist than him, obviously, at least by ideology. And when I look at Trump, he doesn't represent the Republican Party so much. And I'm saying these two things because this is just not an ideological primary at all. The bottom line is what we talked about last week. People are really angry. And they're saying, we're tired of you people that have been in politics for 4,000 generations. Get out of our face. So I look at the map, and Clinton takes Saginaw County, Flint, and Detroit, and then a couple of counties here and there. Whereas Sanders, the map looks like he's green, and
yep.
the Michigan map for the Democratic side is green.
Well, Wayne County went heavily, almost 60% for Hillary Clinton, and only about 38%.
Now,
does
that tell us that Bernie Sanders is just crashing and burning with a black vote?
I would suspect. We know that the Wayne County voters tend to be have one of the higher percentages of minority voters, and actually, it also might be an indication that what we saw in the college towns, the Ann Arbors, and as you can look at that map, you see all over the place young people. When I look at Facebook, I've got some Facebook friends that are liberals, and they are all giddy over what they're hearing Bernie Sanders saying, and this goes back to what you said, that Hillary Clinton and maybe the rest of the Republicans are viewed as being the establishment.
But the fun part about that is, well, first off, what he's saying doesn't add up. Anyone that gets a dollar store calculator knows this math isn't there. That debate aside, this guy is the picture definition of establishment. I know somehow he's been caused not to be viewed that way, but he's been a mayor, he's been a governor, he's been a senator. He spent the vast bulk of his life in politics. How is he not establishment? That's like Trump, who has spent the vast bulk of his life influencing politics with money, and he's not seen as establishment. I find those two things on both sides of the aisle utterly and completely fascinating. Well, and by the way, folks, I'm not attacking. I'm just sharing with you. I don't get it.
Well, you're not alone in not getting it. I doubt anyone gets it. But what has got, I think, the momentum shifting, certainly on the Democrat side and earlier on the Republican side, is the recognition by those of us great unwashed in flyover country that the leaders of the Democrat Party and the leaders of the Republican Party clearly do not get our anger. We are screaming bloody murder, and they refuse to hear us. And let me just finish this one point. The smartest, most wealthy Republican, the most connected Republicans in our country dropped their Trump destroyer bombshell last week with Mitt Romney coming out and denouncing Trump. His numbers skyrocketed off that. That tells us that the brain trust of the Republican Party at the top hasn't got a clue.
See, I got to tell you, I don't see it that way, and let me tell you why I don't.
But it happened.
But listen, it did happen, but I don't assign the credit, negative credit as it be, to where you do. I don't think that there is a brain trust at the top of either party, by the way. When we look at the chair of the Democratic Party, does she look like a brain trust? Come on, stop it. I think that the reality of the Mitt deal was Mitt himself. I think he can't stand the idea of being second fiddle, having lost and watching Trump. And, of course, he doesn't appraise Trump very highly, and I think he's very wrong to do that. One of the things that Ludwig von Wiedendorsky is texting me, and I'll put some words in his mouth, but he's saying that Trump has done a great job at branding his opposition. Mitt never had the tenacity to do that. And in fact, if you recall, during the 2012 campaign, one of the things that people like me and you hopped up and down yelling is, Mitt, defend yourself, defend us, say something. Now, Trump has went to the extreme, but I think people want extreme right now. So they've forgiven things like 4 marriages and his partial birth abortion stances, this endless array of to call it non-traditional Republican stances is a massive understatement. But they've forgiven him just to have somebody with enough gumption, let's use that word, enough gumption to tell people to shut up, which is what he's doing, and people are applauding it.
Well, 2 things happened yesterday that are important. We'll find out how important they are going down the road. Number one, of course, was the victories of Trump in 3 of the major states, but more importantly was the collapse of the Rubio campaign. So if in fact Cruz is able to bring in the remains of some of the candidates who've moved on, and if in fact Rubio does pull out, unfortunately for the Cruz fans, Kasich scored what many considered to be a notable third place. So we'll see. It seems like the fighting inside is going to go on, and the additional, the one thing that has not taken a lot of or gotten a lot of publicity, but yesterday, Ben Carson came out and endorsed
Trump.
He endorsed Donald Trump.
Yeah,
that's going to carry an awful lot of votes.
I heard him the day before on a radio interview somewhere, and everything he said was an endorsement, short of actually using the words. And his reason was what he articulated in that is he believed that Trump could reach across the aisles and bring people together and get things done. Now, I'm one of the people that, of course, people say, Mike, you're an ideologue, and I get that. But I think if I have to sell my soul, then what difference does it make if I win? And so I wrestle with that a little bit. Of course, there's Trump supporters that, when they hear me say that, are infuriated with me, and I get it. It's okay. We're different. Once he's our nominee, and the choice is between him and Clinton, who I absolutely cannot stand. I haven't liked her since the first time I ever watched her on stage. I think she's an absolute ideologue lunatic. So when I got the two of them in front of me, I'm going to be a Trump guy. I know that coming. I'm getting that hat sized right now because I think it's inevitable. As much as I'm a Cruz supporter, I've endorsed him. I've met him. I like him. But to one of your points, one of the things I almost found funny, not with you, but in the general political universe of consensus, is that he got a really strong third-place victory. Third-place victory.
Well, that was Kasich, and I think his point.
Come on,
he's
in
point
third
was
place, and it's time for him to pack his lunch and go home.
Well, the reason that folks make note of that, and I mostly agree with your comments on it, but the reason they make note of that is that much like Bernie Sanders, who started out with 3% and all of a sudden came here and won Michigan, A lot of folks, as a matter of fact, I was surprised the number of people that told me that they did, in fact, personally vote for Kasich. A lot of folks, because of the last weekend's debate, have switched their vote and made him a factor. Whether that's going to carry through is unlikely, but again, who knows going forward. Let me just say one.
I don't think he's going to win his own state.
One thing that will happen, almost for sure, the votes in Michigan were clear. A narrow victory, but a victory nonetheless for Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton. But because of the rules within the Democrat Party, Hillary Clinton most likely will come out of this with more delegates. And if you have done, and I suspect you have, if you look at Facebook and if you look at comments by the very fervent, enthusiastic, almost rabid Bernie Sanders supporters, if in fact they feel that Hillary Clinton gets the nomination in a way that they don't think is fair, and that's their definition of fair, I think they will sit out the election. I know that there are folks that say if Trump gets the nomination, or if he doesn't, that may happen in the Republican Party, but the Bernie Sanders supporters are Bernie Sanders supporters. They are not Democrats. So we'll see what happens. It seems to me that whoever wins the Republican nominations, that's going to be a big plus for them.
We're going to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about delegate counts and what could possibly happen at both, and by the way, folks, at both the state and the national conventions, because there's more to this than who won what. Folks, we'll be right back.
And now we return to the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com.
Listen, folks, this is a little bit like three-level chess, because we watch on television the results of the folks that come in. There's also a delegate battle, but there's a delegate battle both on a state and on a federal level. And then, and for instance, there's always the money battle. That's the third level. Scott Walker, who was I thought the world of Scott Walker early on.
The governor of Wisconsin.
Great guy. I was over in Wisconsin during the recall against him. He didn't capitulate. He stayed on message. He was organized. But then when he got onto the national stage and tried to raise the dough, that's a whole different world. That appears to be what caused the wheels to fall off of his wagon. But he was a great guy. I say all that because it's a lot more complex than, do we like Trump's bombastic or is Cruz too evangelical? You know, all of those things they're all part of it, yeah. But, and the reason, let's pause for a little bit and look where we're at in the bigger picture. Right now, and I'm getting this from AP, right now AP has Trump at 458 delegates. And I believe it's 1,200 and something that's necessary.
1,237.
1,237. He's at 458. Cruz is 99 delegates behind him at 359. Rubio at 151, and I honestly believe Rubio is done. He wants to be a governor, and if he takes a bath in his own state, he won't be a governor. He'll be nothing. And I don't think he'll stay in the race until next week because of that fact. How do you say I want to be a governor now after you just shellacked me? And I don't see that happening. Kasich is a great guy. I think Kasich's going to end up as part of the administration. He's going to stay in. I don't think he's going to win Ohio, but I do think he's a solid thinker, and he'll be in Washington D.C. I believe that. So we'll see. But the interesting part is we're hearing a lot about a contested convention or a brokered convention, and I got to tell you, I don't see that. When I look at it and I just do the math on it, when I take where Trump is at now, I believe he's going to win Florida. I believe he's going to win Ohio. And just those two victories, plus the little things he's picking up that we're not counting, puts him so close to it that I don't see it. What do you think?
I tend to agree with you. Prognosticating on this election has been rough. We know the experts are not even remotely close, and we're not experts. But the numbers of folks out there who are angry with the Republican Party and who are angry with the Democrat Party are in the tens of millions, and we're just seeing that as they come out, as you mentioned earlier, that Trump can say some of the most audacious, wild things and still get elected. Now, I would say this. if something that no one predicts happens, you might see a real choice in Ted Cruz, and that would be if both John Kasich and Rubio were to pull out quickly. The problem with that is, and maybe it'll happen, but in the coming elections, the primary elections for the Republican side, Virgin Islands, which is kind of interesting. I keep forgetting. We've got coming up on March 10th, Virgin Islands. On March 12th, the District of Columbia, Guam. The Northern Mariana Islands actually have a convention for the Democrats.
And several of those association groups can only vote in the primary. They have no general election vote.
Yes, Guam only presidential preference vote, nothing for the general. But coming March 15th, which is, of course, less than a week away, Florida, Illinois, Missouri, Northern Mariana Islands Republican Caucus, North Carolina, and Ohio. So I've got to believe that a week from today,
we're going to know who the nominee will be.
We're going to know who the nominee is, and it's at this point, it's most likely to be Donald Trump. Honestly, on the Democrat side, I just don't know. I mean, with the superdelegate situation in the Democrat Party, it looks almost guaranteed that Hillary's going to win it. But what happened yesterday in Michigan is ground shaking. If you're a Democrat and you're thinking there's a chance for Bernie Sanders, you're going to come out and vote in these elections.
You might, but then you look at Mississippi where she got 80+% of the vote. I mean, just an overwhelming majority. And by the way, the irony of that is that Mississippi is traditionally considered to be a more religious, a Bible part of the Bible Belt. And you go, why are they picking her over him? And it reminds me of Trump.
Well, he's
doing well in
he's a non-religious, non-practicing Jew. So I'm not sure that you're going to get your Baptist all geeked up about a non-religious white guy from Vermont.
How about a non-religious flaming liar?
Well, of course that's sadly a moniker that a lot of people would put on virtually on too many of these candidates anyway, if not all.
I'm just sorry, folks. When I look at the two, I'm going, yowzers. And one of the things that's interesting is that the media and even you and I have spent a lot of time talking about the angst within the Republican Party. And the reality of it is, like it or not, and we had this debate last week, is that Trump, depending on where we're measuring, is somewhere between 30 and 40%. Which means 60+% are not on fire, filled with rage and angst and willing to vote for him, at least at this point. But when I look at the Democratic side, that party looks absolutely split in half.
Well, I agree with you. As I said before the break, you talk to these Bernie Sanders people, and they are it's almost like speaking. It's almost a religious experience, and it's much like reading about or talking to these folks who were Barack Obama supporters in the first election. This is this old white guy who's never had a job outside of government is viewed by somebody with a passion that I don't think I've seen. Maybe in the Ron Paul people, of course, but that was a very tiny number of folks.
Some guy writes on his Facebook page. He said, "I was looking to find Trump's victory comment, so I'm scanning through the channels to find one of the channels that was carrying it." He said, "I finally got there, but I thought it was the Home Shopping Network. I wasn't sure." So he's got all of his paraphernalia and stuff that he sells.
There's passion on the Trump side too. Those supporters
I got
are
such
passionate.
a kick out of that.
Well, like I said, for those of you who are wondering how long will this long national nightmare go on, next Tuesday we'll probably
it's going to be done.
Simplify things. Well,
at least on the GOP side, it's going to be so close to being done. It's done. Whether Kasich gets out or not, he's going to lose.
If Kasich wins in Ohio, and if Rubio wins in Florida, it's going to continue on.
Did you bring your wallet to play some bets with me?
Boy, I'll tell you, that's one thing. Do not make bets on this particular election because everyone's been wrong just about every single time.
I'd go $10 a race. I don't think Kasich can take Ohio, and I don't. In fact, I'd double my money in Florida that Rubio cannot win. He's not there to start with. So, I mean, they're sitting there
Mike,
thinking
you're probably right, but who knows?
Sitting there thinking we sure wished we had a senator because we have one that doesn't vote even when he's not a candidate.
Well, the key to any election is voter turnout. And one of the things I did doing my little show prep here this morning, looked at what the turnout in Muskegon County, and it's
Right.
just one county, and it's a Democrat-dominated county. But how did the election in Muskegon break out? To me, fascinating. 18,632 ballots cast for the Republican, 18,615 ballots cast for the Democrat. Almost identical.
Yeah.
And yet we have about a 60-40 split when it comes to the general election. We had 29% of the registered voters come out for this particular.
Say that number again. How many?
29% of the registered voters in Muskegon County came out and voted. And that compares with 50% in the general election. So there was a big turnout. I would suggest here in Muskegon anyway that the enthusiasm was much, much more on the Republican side and the Bernie Sanders side, for that matter. The enthusiasm, if there was any, on the Democrat side, certainly for Hillary Clinton was soft.
According to the Detroit Free Press, and it's a huge article, and I've not dwelled into it, but the headline of it is "Turnout in Presidential Primary Breaks 1972 Record."
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me. 29% for a non-presidential election, astounding. For a primary election, that's astounding.
But the numbers I've seen were statewide, just a hair over 20% of the registered voter. And listen, the problem that I have with that, folks, having been a candidate before, it's really frustrating for me because we talk about high voter turnout and then we sign a number to the eligible voter scrolls. But we're not measuring eligible. We're looking at registered voter. If you look at the eligible voter turnout, it's less than 10% or right around 10%.
Now explain to me. I don't know the difference between a registered
the
voter
folks
and an eligible. What's the difference?
When we measure 20% or whatever the actual number is, they're almost always, not always, but almost always measuring those folks who are currently registered to vote. Well, there are a lot of folks that are not registered to vote, and they're not included in that math. So 20% of registered is just a hair over 10% of eligible voters, all the people that could have voted, registered or otherwise, and just didn't bother.
Well, let me give you. I'll give you some statistics because I actually looked at that a little bit.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. Hey, it's early in the morning, baby. The Muskegon County has about 180,000 residents, and of course that includes folks who are not citizens. That includes folks who are under 18. But we have 180,000 residents. We have about 129,000 registered voters. I suspect that covers just about everybody who's eligible. And remember, a registered voter. These numbers have been a little distorted over the years because if you get a driver's license, you are automatically registered to vote because of the motor voter bill. So while there are a lot of folks out there without driver's licenses, I don't think statistically, at least here in Muskegon County, that's a big difference. But again, 180,000 folks live in Muskegon County. About 129,000 are registered to vote. That's from the county clerk's office.
Let's shift gears just a little bit. Michigan has 59 delegates. That's what was on the Republican side. That was up for grabs, and the way the split went is that Trump takes 25 of those 59, and both Kasich and Cruz earn 17 apiece. So when you look at the delegate count, which is really, folks, what counts, Cruz and Kasich were a tie. Now, shortly, coming up in April 8th and 9th, the GOP, the state GOP, will have, first on the 8th, which is a Friday, we're going to have a congressional caucus. That's where all of the congressional districts gather separately the day before the state convention. Each of those caucuses, the purpose of them will be to figure out who's going to be, for instance, in the 2nd district, our district, we get 3 delegates and 3 alternates. So our world...
To the Republican Convention in Cleveland.
To the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. That's what the whole purpose of the caucus on April 8th is to determine of the precinct delegates that got involved in their county party and that were elected to become state delegates, They'll be in attendance at the caucus. Of those folks, we'll pick 3 delegates and 3 alternates. And then that math, who those 3 are represented by the numbers that I just stated. So 25, percentage-wise at least. And that's how it will be. Trump will take top. The second person will go to, and then Kasich and Cruz, at least based on the math I'm seeing currently, will be a tie, one apiece. And then those folks, if they go to when they go to the national convention, we keep hearing about the brokered, and we touched on it briefly. If it did turn into a brokered or a contested, which are different folks, but if it did, after the first ballot, as I understand it, then those folks that were sent, you're taking an oath to, I'm going to represent Trump if I were the national delegate, and I so won to represent that number. Once I cast my first ballot, if it doesn't go that way, then all of those delegates are free to negotiate and trade and to try to make deals and to come up with something. But one of the things you touched on in the first segment, Jim, was if the math, if on either side, by the way, whether it's at the Democratic or the GOP national conventions, if we come out of that with a nominee that isn't who the people elected, there'd be holy hell to pay. Because we keep hearing about the establishment or whoever the heck that really, by the way, folks, there is no establishment. There's a handful of people with a lot of money. If we came out with a candidate that they chose rather than say Trump if he's by then the winner, they'd flip that party. And the same for the Democratic Party. The wolves would be at the door with pitchforks and fire.
Well, I got to tell you, that's a possibility. It's very unlikely because there's so many things to happen between now and then. I keep telling folks, and you and I have spoken about this on air, but come Super Tuesday, we'll have a really good sense of what's going to happen. And then, okay, well, that didn't turn out. Well, come the Michigan, Mississippi, Idaho, Hawaii the following week, that'll clear things up going forward. I'd say things are as fuzzy today as they've ever been.
I don't agree with that. I think that before we set off on this path, we had 17 people, and there was a point when Ben Carson was up in the top 1 or 2 pollings. They've traded places a little bit. There was a point in time when Carly was on. In fact, I remember you on this show bragging about Carly. All of those folks, because of these cycles like Super Tuesday, like yesterday, and especially like this coming one, each one of them has brought a little greater focus. It's almost like you're looking at something in a microscope and you're slowly dialing it in to bring it into focus. And each one of these events have brought us a little bit closer.
Well, I think
the image
with that.
I think the image is really clear right now. There is no path to victory for Rubio, none.
Well,
you can't do the math and have him the winner.
It is. These primaries have been not very indicative of who is going to win, but they have been indicative of who is going to be dropping out. And in that, I agree with you. But if we have an election next week where Rubio wins in Florida and where Kasich wins in Ohio.
Or me. That's just as likely.
Well, they've both been elected multiple times, or at least they're actually Kasich multiple times statewide. So it's not an unlikely event.
And listen, on that point,
but
by
if
the way,
that does happen, they will stay in, and that's where I'm saying we had a situation here in Michigan yesterday where a guy who all of the experts said was going to lose by 20 points, and he actually won. So I don't think it's clear at all. Any number of different things can happen. We will hopefully know a little more next week, but maybe not.
He wouldn't get his wallet out. Listen, I like Kasich. I don't agree with some of his policies like Common Core, etc. Having said that, I was at the debate in Detroit. He truly was the only. I think Cruz did okay. Of the 4, though, I think he was the guy that looked like to be almost cliche.
That's what I've heard people say.
He looked like the adult on the stage, and I think Cruz did okay. I think he won the debate, and I'm a Cruz guy. You got to stand back and be honest. That's what I saw. And I think that's how he did as well as he did here in Michigan. I think that's why he's splitting delegates with Cruz. But listen, both of them were still a mile and a half behind Trump. It's just math. And right now you know that Trump knows these things. He wants nothing more than to get rid of all of his competition. And so when you're looking at, and by the way, Cruz is thinking, to your point earlier, if I can get rid of Kasich and if I can get rid of Rubio, if you add the math up, I'm in this game.
If they both lose, if Kasich and Rubio lose their states next Tuesday, that's only 6 days away. If they lose, then they will fold their tents. I can't imagine a scenario where they would not. And then you'll have a two-man race, and then again, you'll have no clue who's going to win. So I don't think it's clear whatsoever. We just had a situation in Michigan yesterday with Bernie Sanders. Who knows what's going to happen next Tuesday with Bernie Sanders? My golly. This is all new stuff that's just come up.
Are you voting for Bernie
exciting.
Sanders? You didn't vote for Bernie Sanders, did you?
Well, I do like free stuff, and Bernie has promised a lot of free stuff. But no, I voted for Ted Cruz. But I must say, I'm attracted to the fact that Barack Obama, that Donald Trump will say things that a lot of people are afraid to say, and it concerns me that, with the exception perhaps of, with the exception for sure of Ted Cruz, that so many people on the Republican side and the leaders, and when I say leaders, I mean the governors of Republicans, I mean the party chairman, certainly in Michigan, virtually every single elected leader within our state is either quietly or vocally anti-Trump. We just saw the top aide of the Michigan Republican Party go out and denounce Trump on social media yesterday. So they're not afraid of jumping on Trump. And one of the things that gets me is Donald Trump, what brought him out of no place was he stood tall saying some very hurtful words to a lot of people about immigration. That's an issue that really matters to Americans. And he was very firm about it. He repeated it often. This is an issue that isn't going to go away. Now, when you get two guys that are strong, the wall, strong, America determining who will be able to come here legally. When you get two people like Cruz and Trump facing off, I don't know what's going to happen.
Folks, listen, what is going to happen is we're going to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to delve into an enigma.
And now we're back to the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. It is segment 3, and that means the Enigma Report has arrived.
You know what? The word socialism or socialist society is something that most folks on both sides of the aisle push back on and have for years. And in fact, I remember a time in the United States where if you were identified as a liberal, it was the kiss of political death. That was when I was a very young person, and we were, in fact, I can tell you it was back watching even the Nixon races when the question was Hubert Humphrey's era and all of that. You couldn't get labeled that because if you did, you were in trouble. But even on the Republican side now, when we talk about Obamacare, we don't talk about repealing Obamacare. We talk about repeal and replace. The concept of socialism permeates our entire class structure. It just does. There's a guy that's on my Facebook page. He's a nice guy. We don't agree. In fact, I've talked about him on the air before. He's always very respectful. He's hard left. I'm not. So he'll present his points. And if I rail against socialism, he'll point at the roads. That's socialism. That's how they got there. He'll point at health care, even pre-Obama. That's how it is. And when he runs down the list, it's hard to argue with him because he's right. These are things that are, like I wrote in the book, they're like a slowly injected disease from a hypodermic needle where we're just slowly, and picking up speed, I might add, in embracing things that are socialistic by nature. You know, to your point off air, people want free stuff. Okay, but that's socialism. And so when I look to the world around us, historically and contemporarily, at socialist systems, we have always provided more for more people with the system that we're walking away from. That to me is an enigma. And what I think a lot of folks don't understand is up into the early 20th century, things like roads were private adventures. They weren't prevailing wage government functions, and that was none of that stuff. And I just think we've walked way, way, way down a road that I'm not convinced we're paying a close enough attention to. And part of it goes to little things like voter turnout in a primary. It's the number one reason for not voting in a primary. Well, they make me vote on a party, period, and I'm not going to do that. Folks, a primary is a party nomination. So what an indictment of education. And I fear for our future when I watch the things that we're watching. And folks, this is not a slam on Trump, but a fair amount of what he's advocating is forms of socialism. It just is. And I'm not calling him a socialist, so please don't burn my house down. But we can't help but pause for a moment and write down these things and pay attention to them if we at all care about where our daughters and sons are going to be. What say you, Jim?
Well, I think maybe you inadvertently answered your own question. We do know that teachers in the public schools in the United States tend to be overwhelmingly Democrat, and many of them active Democrats. So they have a personal view of the expansion of the concept of socialism. They are, in fact, government employees. The way that you offset that is to have articulate leaders on the other side who will give reasons why socialism is not good or why capitalism is good. I would ask you rhetorically to come up with a leader, and let's forget Ted Cruz and the few guys running for president right now, because they come up with all sorts of thoughts in the campaign, but who prior to the campaign, any of the leaders of the Republican Party who could articulate why socialism is bad and why capitalism and our economic system is good. And I'll give you an example. Just Google Reagan government quote, and you will see dozens of comments by Ronald Reagan commenting on government's flaws to solve our evils or solve the issues that matter to us. The classic one, government does not solve problems, it subsidizes them. The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. We don't have in the Republican Party folks who seem to have the backbone, the spine, to stand up and explain to people why socialism is bad and why our system of capitalism is good. And if you can't do that, then if you don't have the opposite point of view out there, then people are going to assume there is no opposite point of view. And when you just sort of asked your own Enigma question, I was thinking, well, how would I best answer that? And right off the top of my head, I don't have the quickie. Now, we can use examples of socialism like Venezuela, like Cuba, like virtually all of the Eastern European countries.
How about if we don't look at failed examples? How about if we look at success examples? And when we do that, we have to look at the United States and say, wait a minute, we went through a civil war, and by the mid-1870s, we'd become the greatest economy in the world. In the 1870s, folks. Now, we're not there anymore, by the way, but we was up like a Roman candle. Boom, 1870s were on fire, and then you start looking at changes that begin to happen. Once we were no longer able, it's the part of it's states' rights issues. We talked about that on this show before, but things like, Matt Wiedenhoff is texting me about the New York subway. The New York subway was a private project, and it was inevitably sold to the municipality with the idea of the municipality growing it. Well, they didn't do that. Government can't get out of its own way.
Well, you would think it would be easy. You would think you would have Republicans at the governor's level, at the Senate representative level, running around explaining all of those wonderful benefits. We don't seem to have those articulate leaders. Now, I'll tell you this. Maggie Thatcher took over a Great Britain, England, that had declined into absolutely paralyzing socialism.
Still is.
And she changed it. She unnationalized the coal mine. She unnationalized the transportation. She articulated what she wanted to do, and she articulated the reasons why.
People are funny. If you look at Great Britain, they had Winston Churchill saved them, and then they kicked him to the curb. Those are a funny thing. But listen, when we look in America's history, following Woodrow Wilson, we'd gotten to, and still do, by the way, demonize success. And that's really the backbone of why it is that some Republicans and most Democrats are afraid to point to success and say, emulate that, folks.
Yep.
That's what they don't. Everyone's afraid to point at success and say, emulate it.
That's why.
And I say, emulate it. Please stop looking for the government and whining like a little girl and little boy, whatever you want to choose, and emulate success. I don't get it. It all comes from the roaring 20s and the 30s when they were very successful at painting Republicans as being fat cats with top hats and a cigar. People nowadays can still fit that image. But when you look at 50-50 United States, I might be fat, by the way, but I don't have a cigar. I'm none of those things. They've done a really great job at saying people ought not to succeed. Only government can succeed for you. Folks, that's an ugly, ugly ideology.
Well, that's why Republicans are looking elsewhere from the traditional elected Republicans of the past. So we'll see what happens. But I'm with you in being frustrated. But you cannot change things if you don't have a leader willing to articulate the change and the reasons for the change.
Absolutely true. It's a very frustrating thing for me when everyone's first answer is what government can do. My first answer is please get government out of my way. And it's become the cliche argument between the two sides. But folks, it's an enigma to me as to why why would anyone want to defer their responsibility and their potential success to anybody or anything else? I don't get that, but it's the same as me at my store. If I work 70 hours and I work really, really hard, somebody else gets the fruits of my labor. I reject that passionately. I do it for me and I do it for you. The notion that work harder because somebody else deserves it, that's insanity. That's not how America got to be exceptional. It is absolutely not how America got to be the greatest economy in the world, not how America got to provide more foundational income and solvency for more people than any other system in the world. It's an amazing thing to me. But listen, find me at Talk on Twitter, at Talk Mike Hewitt, or find us on Facebook / I wish you could see the signs he's holding up, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Find us on / The Mike Hewitt Show on Facebook. And folks, we'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you very, very much for tuning in.